Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're looking at something really specific. A single verse from the Old Testament, actually.
That's right. Hosea chapter 4, verse 4.
No, maybe sounds a bit dusty. Old Testament verse.
Yeah, maybe. But trust us on this one. There's a lot packed in there that's surprisingly relevant for how we live our faith today.
Definitely. So we're going to, dig into this passage from Hosea.
Yep. Unpack what it meant back then.
And then connect it. See how its core message about faithfulness to God, faithfulness to each other, how that still lands, right now.
Exactly.
So our mission, if you like, is to get what this ancient text was saying and then figure out how it speaks to the stuff we face, the challenges, the responsibilities.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Okay, so Hosea 4.4, let's set the scene. What kind of world are we stepping into here?
Right. We're talking about the northern kingdom of Israel during Hosea's ministry. And honestly, it's a society that had kind of lost its way. Badly.
Lost its way how?
Well, they had this incredible history, right? God rescuing them from Egypt, setting them up in the promised land. A foundational story.
The core of their identity.
Exactly. And yet they'd turn their backs on the very God who did all that. It's almost like a national case of spiritual amnesia, forgetting who they were.
Yeah. Forgetting the foundation. And this wasn't just a minor slip-up, was it? Like, oops, forgot my prayers today.
Oh, no. Far from it. Hosea paints a really, really stark picture. Widespread unfaithfulness.
Like what specifically?
Well, chasing after the gods of the nations around them, making idols, treating these things as if they were real, powerful deities, and God's laws. Basically ignored. Hosea lists things like rampant lying, killing, stealing, adultery. It was a society really breaking down at the seams because they had abandoned God's ways.
So they ended up looking just like everyone else.
Yeah.
Different from the pagan nations.
Pretty much. Blending right in. Any distinctiveness based on their covenant with God was, fading fast. And Hosea hits this point hard. They'd forgotten the God of their ancestors. The very heart of their faith just sort of dissolved.
Okay, that's a grim picture.
It is. And that context is crucial for understanding verse 4. Because in Hosea 4.4, the spotlight swings directly onto these spiritual leaders, the priests.
Okay. So what does it say about them?
Well, the verse itself is part of a larger argument, but the key part for us is this indictment. God, through Hosea, basically says the people are stumbling, they lack knowledge, and then points a finger squarely at those who are supposed to be teaching them.
The priests. So what was their job meant to be? What were they supposed to be doing?
They were the designated teachers, the guardians of God's law, the spiritual guides for the nation.
Like shepherds.
Exactly. And mediators, too, in a sense, helping connect the people to God through worship and instruction. But they failed.
Yeah.
Massively. Instead of guiding people towards God, they actually became stumbling blocks themselves. They neglected their duties.
Neglected how? Just lazy.
Worse than lazy. They were actively participating in the very sins they should have been condemning. It's like the watchman on the wall not only fell asleep, but actually opened the gates to the enemy.
That's quite an accusation. What kind of things were they doing?
Hosea talks about them embracing pagan cultures, getting tangled up in idol worship themselves, a complete betrayal of their role.
So not just religious failure, but moral failure, too.
Oh, absolutely. They were implicated in the violence, the corruption, the general immorality sweeping the nation. Hosea makes it clear these leaders, who should have been the spiritual anchors, were actively contributing to their rot, and God held them responsible.
Okay. That's heavy. So let's make the jump. How does this ancient critique of these specific priests, thousands of years ago, how does that connect to us today as Christians?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting, I think, because our first instinct often when we see faithlessness or moral problems around us is to look out there.
Point the finger at the world.
Right. But Hosea 4, especially this focus on the priests, kind of flips the script. It suggests that within the faith community itself, responsibility starts. Well, it starts closer to home, with those who are meant to know God's ways, who are meant to lead or guide.
Sort of like that idea in 1 Peter, that judgment begins with the household of God.
Exactly like that. It puts a certain weight on leaders, yes, but maybe also on mature believers, on anyone who has been entrusted with understanding God's word.
So it prompts some self-reflection then, instead of just outward criticism.
Definitely. It forces us to ask some tough questions, like, are we, those of us who follow Christ, are we faithfully teaching God's word? Are we accurately representing it?
And helping others understand it, live it.
Yes.
Or
Or are we kind of letting the surrounding culture seep in, allowing worldly ways of thinking to dilute our own faith, our own practices?
Or it's slow compromise.
It can be. Sometimes it's subtle, little ways we start thinking or acting more like the world around us than like Christ. We blend in too much.
And you're saying this isn't just about pastors or official teachers.
No, I think it applies more broadly. It's about how each of us lives out our faith. Are we actually modeling a life that looks different? Holy, in our thoughts, our words, the choices we make every day.
Or are we just camouflaged?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Hosea's issue with the priests wasn't just their bad theology, it was the huge gap between what they claimed and how they lived, that disconnect.
Okay, that really highlights this link, doesn't it? Between being faithful to God personally and then being faithful towards other people. How does Hosea show that connection?
Well, I think they're presented as completely intertwined. You can't really separate them. Hosea's message implies that when we see others in the faith stumbling, our first reaction shouldn't be blame.
What should it be?
It should be about restoration.
Yeah.
Love. Think about Galatians 6.1, gently restoring someone caught in sin. But here's the key part from Hosea's angle. Our own faithfulness matters hugely in that process.
How so?
Our consistent obedience to God's speaking truth, loving sacrificially, serving humbly, that becomes a powerful testimony. It can actually awaken someone else, draw them back.
So my personal walk with God isn't just personal. It impacts others directly.
Absolutely. Our faithfulness can be a signpost pointing people towards Christ.
Right.
Or our unfaithfulness, our compromise, can be a stumbling block. Just like those priests, it creates ripples one way or the other.
That's a sobering thought.
It is.
So as we wrap this up, what's the core takeaway for someone listening today thinking about Hosea 4.4?
I think the enduring message is this powerful call to self-examination, especially within the church, within the community of believers.
Taking that ancient warning seriously.
Yes. Take it to heart. Avoid the same failures. That means being really diligent, really sincere about knowing God's word and actually living it, not just knowing about it.
And remembering everyone has influence.
Everyone. We're all called to be salt and light, right? In our own spheres. But the crucial first step, the place Hosea points us back to, is looking inward. When you see sin, when you see faithlessness, the first question needs to be, okay, Lord, am I being faithful?
Right. Check yourself first.
Exactly. Start there. Pray for a pure heart, for courage, for unwavering devotion yourself.
So to sort of summarize this deep dive then, Hosea 4.4, these ancient words, they remind us that those who are meant to know better, to lead, have a huge responsibility. And our own individual faithfulness, that's the foundation for having any kind of positive impact on others.
Well said. And maybe a final thought for you, listening. Think about your own spheres of influence.
Family, friends.
Work, community, online interactions, wherever you are. How could your commitment to living faithfully ripple outwards? What could that actually look like day to day, embodying these lessons from Hosea?
Something practical to consider.
Yeah. What's one step you could take today? That's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Moving from understanding to actually doing.